They told me she couldn't walk, couldn't talk, that she'd been born that way. They called her special needs, used words like neurological condition, cognitive delay, and permanent dependency. They said she didn't respond to touch, sound, or voice. And for the most part, they were right. Or so it seemed. Because the little girl in the wheelchair, my husband's 9-year-old niece, sat perfectly still. Eyes empty, mouth closed. Not a sound, not a blink. So when my in-laws went to Aspen for their 2-week ski trip and left me alone at their massive estate to care for her, I didn't ask questions. Not because I wasn't curious, but because in this family, curiosity is punished. My husband Evan was swept along with them. His parents insisted, and like always he obeyed. I stayed with Isla. The first night, I made her dinner as instructed. I placed her in front of the TV, just like the carebinder said, and I started warming up my own meal in the kitchen. The nurse who used to come on weekends, Jackie, I think hadn't been around lately. Her name was written a few times in the carebinder, always next to check-ins and dosage logs. But the last entry under her name was nearly 2 months old. Amanda just told me she wasn't a good fit. I didn't ask. Not because I wasn't curious, but because in this family, curiosity is punished. I didn't expect her to respond. She never had. But just a few minutes later, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from behind me. I turned around, and Isla was standing in the doorway. No wheelchair, no brace, no blank stare. Her hands trembled slightly on the frame. But she looked me dead in the eyes and spoke. 7 words. Clear, soft, terrified. They're not helping me. They're hurting me. That was the moment I realized everything I had been told was a lie. I stood there frozen, the wooden spoon still in my hand. The pasta sauce was bubbling behind me, completely forgotten. I stared at Isla, at her small body standing on its own unsupported. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, but she didn't move. She just stood there watching me. I stepped forward slowly. Isla. She didn't run. She didn't smile. She just looked terrified. Do you want to sit down? I asked gently, unsure what to do. She gave me the smallest nod. I grabbed a chair from the breakfast table and guided her toward it like she might collapse at any second. Her knees trembled slightly, but she made it there on her own. I watched her movements, awkward but not unnatural. More like someone who hadn't been allowed to move freely in a long time. I crouched in front of her. Sweetheart, what did you mean? They're hurting you. She looked around, panicked. Are the cameras on? I blinked. Cameras. She pointed vaguely toward the ceiling and my stomach turned. There were small black domes in the corners, barely noticeable. Security cameras. I'd seen them but hadn't paid attention. But now I realized some were in the hallways. One was directly outside Isla's room. I only talk when I'm sure I'm alone, she whispered. They say if I mess up, they'll send me away forever. Who says that? She looked down. Grandpa. And Mom. Sometimes Grandma too. I took a breath, steadying my voice. Okay, Isla, I need you to tell me everything. Not right now. But we'll talk. Somewhere safe. I promise. She nodded again. This time with tears in her eyes. Thank you. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the footage from the past 3 hours on the house's smart panel. I learned quickly that the estate had 7 active cameras, none of which were in Isla's bedroom. Thank God. At 2 a.m., I crept into her room with a blanket and sat by her bedside. She opened her eyes almost immediately. Did I mess up? She asked. No, I whispered. You were incredibly brave. She reached under her pillow and pulled out something unexpected. A small leather-bound notebook. I write stuff down, she said softly. Things I'm not supposed to know. I flipped it open. Her handwriting was neat. Careful, way too advanced for a child who was supposedly cognitively impaired. She had entries. Dozens of them. Dated and organized. June 12th. Mom told Nurse Judy to double it after dinner. July 8th. Grandpa said the papers are ready and no one can stop them. August 2nd. I pretended to choke, but no one cared. I closed the notebook, my hands trembling. You've been documenting all of this? I asked. I read a book about evidence, she said. It said it's better if you write it all down. I didn't know whether to cry or applaud her. Do you know why they're doing this? I asked. She nodded slowly. Granny and Pops left me money. Lots of it. But I only get it if I'm normal. My breath caught in my throat. How do you know that? I wasn't always like this, she said simply. I used to go to preschool. I used to run. She looked at me with such sadness, such awareness, it nearly broke me. I don't want to be their secret anymore, she whispered. The next morning I woke up before the sun. I had made a decision. If this child had enough courage to stand up after 5 years of pretending to be someone she wasn't, then I could stand up for her too. At breakfast, Isla sat silently in her wheelchair. The cameras were still active. We were careful. But every time our eyes met, there was something unspoken there, an alliance. I started planning. I took photos of her journal entries. I examined the care binder her mother had left and noticed inconsistencies, especially in the medication section. Some of the drugs weren't approved for pediatric use. One was a powerful sedative commonly used in psychiatric hospitals. I looked up every pill label, dosage, warning. What I saw terrified me. They weren't keeping Isla calm. They were keeping her sedated, detached, disconnected. That night I gave her the vanilla-flavored shake, but this time, no pills. She smiled faintly. Her words were clearer, her balance stronger. Thank you, she whispered as I tucked her into bed. I feel more like me today. I stroked her hair, barely holding back tears. We're just getting started, sweetheart. By the third day, Isla was stronger, not just physically but mentally. Without the sedatives dulling her mind, her personality began to emerge. She was witty, observant, and heartbreakingly cautious. She moved slowly around the house with my help, always careful to slump in the chair when near camera. We had worked out a system: 1 tap for okay, 2 taps for danger. She was 9 years old, but everything about her felt older, like she'd lived a lifetime in silence. That morning as I made her oatmeal, she glanced toward the hallway. Mom keeps papers in her office, she said softly. The important stuff. Financial. Legal. She always locks it. I nodded. Do you know where the key is? Behind the fake plant. In the blue vase. She didn't even hesitate. That afternoon, while Isla pretended to nap under the camera in her room, I slipped into Amanda's office. It was decorated like a lifestyle magazine, minimal, expensive, and cold. Nothing personal. Not even a photo of Isla. I walked straight to the shelf, moved the dusty blue vase and reached inside. A small silver key. I tried it on the locked filing cabinet. Click. Inside were 4 drawers. One was labeled Isla. My stomach dropped. I pulled out everything. Medical reports. Signed prescription requests. Guardianship agreements. And then, tucked between folders, a brown envelope with Isla's name in cursive handwriting. It was sealed. Postmarked from 6 years ago. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. To my dearest Isla. If you're reading this, it means we didn't get to say goodbye. But know this. We loved you more than words could ever hold. We've left you a trust, $5 million, to be released when you turn 18, but only if you are mentally and physically competent. Not because we doubted you, but because we wanted to protect you from those who might use you for your money. We trust you'll grow up strong, curious, and free. Never let anyone tell you who you are. Love. Granny and Pops. I had to sit down. The room tilted for a moment. This wasn't just financial. This was premeditated cruelty. They'd fabricated an illness to ensure Isla would fail the very criteria that granted her freedom and access to what was rightfully hers. I scanned the rest of the drawer. There were emails printed between Amanda and her father, Robert. She's nearly 9. We'll need a psych eval next year. If we time it right, the court will never question your authority as long as her mental records are consistent. Another. Once the 18-year clause is voided, we can transfer assets without restriction. I'll handle the bank. You keep her quiet. My hands were shaking. This was organized. Clinical. Not just emotional abuse, this was a financial conspiracy. That night, Isla and I sat in the guest room, far from the cameras. I showed her the letter. She didn't cry, but her eyes glistened with something heavier than tears. They knew, she whispered. Granny and Pops. They knew what Mom was like. I nodded. They tried to protect you. She opened her journal and began writing. I let her. I didn't want to break her focus. Then she looked up. There's a safe. My head turned. Where? In Mom's room. Behind the painting of the boat. She opened it once while I was supposed to be sleeping. Do you know the code? She bit her lip. She always says her birthday is the only date that matters. That night, while Isla showered, I slipped into Amanda's room. It was even more sterile than her office. I moved the painting aside and found a black keypad safe embedded in the wall. I tried Isla's birthday first. Nothing. Then Amanda's. Click. Inside were folders, a diamond necklace, and a USB stick. I pocketed the USB and flipped through the papers. Some were financial, but one caught my eye. A draft petition to the state for full conservatorship. Filed under mental incompetency. It was dated for Isla's 18th birthday, 9 years from now. They were planning to control her entire adult life. Back in the guest room. I plugged the USB into Amanda's laptop. At first it looked encrypted, just file names with strange codes. But after some trial and error it opened. And what I saw made my stomach drop. One of the videos, dated 3 months after Granny and Pops passed, showed Isla running in a park. Smiling. Talking. Laughing. Another had her coloring a picture, looking up at the camera and saying, I drew a puppy for Grandma. I stared at the screen, rage swelling in my chest. They had proof she was healthy. And they buried it. Isla watched me with cautious hope. What do we do now? She asked. I looked at her, at this brilliant, brave child who had suffered 5 years in silence. We fight back, I said. I stared at the video of Isla running through a park, bright and full of life, then glanced at her now, curled up beside me, eyes wide, face pale. It felt like looking at 2 different children. One alive, the other manufactured. This can't stay buried, I whispered. Isla looked at me. But if they find out, they'll make me take the pills again. Or worse. You won't go back to that. Not ever. Still. I knew this wasn't something I could handle alone. Not legally. Not emotionally. I needed to tell someone. And the only person who should have been by my side was my husband. That night, after Isla was asleep, I stepped outside onto the back patio. The Minnesota air was cold, dry, and biting. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and dialed Evan. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, babe, he said, cheerful. How are things going? I hesitated. Can you talk? Yeah. I just stepped away from the lodge bar. You okay? There was a long pause. I had rehearsed this in my head, but now I didn't know where to start. It's about Isla, I said finally. There's something really wrong, Evan. He didn't answer right away. What do you mean? She can walk. And talk. I saw it. She told me everything. Another pause. Then a chuckle. Rachel, that's not funny. I'm not joking. You're telling me Isla, our niece, who's been diagnosed with a severe cognitive condition since birth, suddenly stood up and talked. She didn't suddenly do anything. She's been pretending. Or more accurately, forced to pretend. I found documents. Videos. Medical records that were hidden. There's a trust fund involved. Her mother and your parents. Okay, Rachel. Stop. His voice turned cold. Stop. You're stressed. You've been alone in that house for days with a disabled child. It's a lot. She's not disabled, I snapped. And I'm not imagining this. I have evidence. He sighed. Rachel. Amanda and my parents have handled Isla's care her entire life. You've known her for what, a few weekends a year. I felt like someone had just pulled the ground out from under me. Are you saying you don't believe me? I'm saying you're jumping to extreme conclusions. And snooping through family files? That's not okay. I could barely breathe. Wow, I said, voice shaking. You really think I'm losing it? I think you need rest. I think you're overwhelmed. Just follow the care instructions until we get back. Right? I whispered. Thanks for the support. I hung up before he could say anything else. Inside, Isla was awake. She'd heard everything. I told you he wouldn't believe you, she said quietly. Tears stung my eyes. I'm so sorry, Isla. She reached for my hand, small fingers curling around mine. It's okay. You do. That was enough for now. The next morning, I contacted the only other person I trusted. Lauren Bishop. College roommate. Family lawyer. Fierce and brilliant. We hadn't spoken in a few months, but this was beyond pride. She answered on the first ring. Jess. It's Rachel now. Married, remember? Oh, right. Sorry. What's going on? I didn't waste time. I told her everything. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, Jesus Christ, Ratch. I have physical evidence. Journal entries. Videos. Financial documents. Drafts of conservatorship petitions. Medical records, falsified ones. This is horrific. You need to document everything. Backup copies. Hide them in more than one place. I already have digital copies, cloud backups. But I'm worried they'll come back before I'm ready. Lauren paused. Do you have access to Isla's current medical file? Only what Amanda left in the care binder. The rest was in the safe. I can try to request her file from the clinic. But if Robert Whitmore has connections there? He does. His name was on one of the donor plaques. Then we go around them. We find someone outside their influence. Ratch, this is a legal minefield. But it's also a human rights case. We're talking about medical abuse, fraud, possibly even conspiracy. I know. Don't confront them directly. Not yet. The moment they suspect you know the truth, they'll move fast. I took a breath. Understood. And Rachel? Yeah. I'm proud of you. Her words hit harder than I expected. That night, while Isla played quietly with a puzzle, I printed out a checklist. Back up all evidence to external drive. Upload to Lauren's private legal server. Organize Isla's journal entries by date. Transcribe Amanda's emails. Photograph the contents of the safe. I was halfway through the list when I got a text from Evan. Flight schedule changed. We're coming back early. Be home by tomorrow night. My heart stopped. I stared at Isla across the room. She was humming to herself, unaware. I had less than 24 hours. And no one else to protect her. The next morning I woke before sunrise. I didn't even need to check the text again. It was seared into my mind. We're coming back early. Be home by tomorrow night. Which, in Whitmore speak, meant they were watching. And they were moving fast. I walked to the guest room where Isla had been sleeping. She was already awake, sitting up, tracing a drawing she'd started the night before. She looked up at me. They're coming, aren't they? I nodded. She didn't cry. Didn't panic. Just said, then I should practice again. Practice what? She gave a hollow smile. Being their broken doll. We spent the rest of the day preparing. I printed hard copies of everything: emails, journal entries, financial documents, the trust letter. I slipped them into an envelope and sealed it shut. On the front I wrote, To Lauren Bishop. Emergency file. Then I hid it beneath the floorboard in the laundry room, a camera-free zone. The USB was backed up 3 ways. One on Lauren's private server. One on a hidden flash drive in my coat lining. And one in a lockbox under the kitchen sink. I erased all local search history from Amanda's laptop. Logged out of every drive. Wiped fingerprints from the safe. By the time the sun set, the estate looked exactly the way they had left it. Except one thing had changed. Me. That night. I tucked Isla into her assigned bedroom. The same sterile, 2-white space with a camera nestled in the corner. She lay motionless, face turned to the wall, arms limp by her side. You don't have to speak if you don't want to, I whispered. Just remember you're not alone. She didn't answer. But she blinked twice. That was our code for I know. The next sound I heard was the front door unlocking. It was 3:12 a.m. They weren't due until evening. But they had lied. Deliberately. I grabbed my robe and hurried down the hall. Pulse hammering in my throat. The Whitmores were already in the foyer. Suitcases stacked by the door, snow still clinging to their coats. Robert stood in the center like a general returning from war. Amanda was rubbing her temples. Eleanor looked fresh as ever, not a strand of hair out of place. And Evan. He stood near the stairs, hands in his pockets, eyes unreadable. Robert looked at me first. Rachel, he said, voice cool. You're up early. I heard the door. Of course. Amanda stepped forward, still in travel clothes. I'll check on Isla. I moved instinctively. She's asleep. Amanda paused. I'll be quick. I followed her into Isla's room, heart pounding. Amanda leaned over her daughter, brushing back Isla's hair. She looks peaceful, she murmured. She's had a calm week, I replied evenly. No incidents. Amanda glanced over her shoulder. Did you follow the medication schedule? Exactly. I'll check the supply later, she said with a tight smile. I smiled back. Of course. She stared at me, searching for cracks. But I had none to offer. Downstairs, Robert poured himself a scotch at 3:30 a.m. like it was 7 p.m. Eleanor removed her gloves delicately. We hope everything went smoothly, she said. Everything was, according to plan, I said, echoing her tone. Evan finally spoke, his voice low. I was unpacking Isla's toy bag just now and something's missing. I tensed. What? Her journal. I saw it last week in her drawer. It's gone. He looked at me then, eyes narrowing. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? She may have moved it. Or lost it. Robert's gaze sharpened. Anything else go missing? Not that I noticed. Another beat of silence. Then Eleanor smiled. Well, we're grateful. Really. Perhaps next time we'll bring you along instead. I forced a laugh. But just as I was about to excuse myself, we all froze. Footsteps. Coming down the stairs. Slow. Steady. Not wheelchair wheels. Not assisted. We turned. And there she was. Isla. Wearing her fuzzy blue pajamas. Standing tall. No braces. No dead eyes. She walked into the living room like a ghost returning from the dead. Amanda gasped. Eleanor's hand went to her mouth. Robert's glass tilted. And then Isla said it. In a voice clear, small, but unshaking. I'm not sick. I never was. Amanda lunged first. No, sweetie, you're confused. Let's get you back to Betty. Isla stepped backward. Don't touch me. Evan stepped forward, now alarmed. Isla, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth. Robert's voice cut through the air. Rachel, what did you do? I stepped between them. I stopped drugging your granddaughter. Amanda screamed. She needs those medications. No, she doesn't. And you know it. Robert moved toward me. You have no idea what you're starting. I stared him down. No, you have no idea what I've already finished. The air in the living room felt like it had frozen. Robert's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the pulse in his temple. Eleanor stood stiffly by the fireplace, lips pressed into a thin line. Amanda looked feral, eyes wide, hands shaking. And Isla. She stood behind me, clutching the hem of my sleeve. Evan stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. What is this? I turned to him, voice low but steady. She can walk, Evan. She can speak. She has for years. They just didn't want anyone to know. Amanda exploded. She's lying. You're both lying. She's confused. She's just having a breakdown. She's not confused, I said. You are. You've gaslit your own daughter for 5 years. Amanda rushed forward, grabbing Isla's arm. We're going upstairs. You need to rest. Sweetie. Let go of her, I snapped. She didn't. So I stepped in. My body shielded Isla's. Don't touch her again. Amanda's face twisted with rage. You think you can steal my daughter from me? Robert raised his voice. Enough. Rachel, you're trespassing. This is our home, and that child is not yours. Then let the law decide that, I said quietly. He narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? Just then, the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Amanda blinked. Who? It's 3 a.m., Eleanor whispered. I smiled faintly. Right on time. I opened the front door. Lauren Bishop stood there in a wool coat, eyes sharp, briefcase in hand. Behind her were 2 police officers and a woman in a gray blazer, a CPS caseworker. Robert's face turned crimson. You've got to be kidding me. Lauren stepped forward, handing the officers paperwork. This is an emergency intervention under Minnesota Statute 260C.301. We have evidence of prolonged medical abuse, fraud, and financial exploitation of a minor. Amanda shrieked. She's lying. She's a lawyer, I said. We tend not to. The CPS worker moved past us gently, kneeling in front of Isla. Hi, sweetheart. My name is Jenna. Can I talk to you? Isla looked at me. I nodded. She's safe, I whispered. Isla turned to Jenna and spoke clearly. They made me take pills that made me sleepy and sick. They told me if I walked or talked, I'd be taken away forever. Jenna's face didn't flinch, but her voice softened. Did they ever hurt you? Isla nodded. Sometimes Mommy pinched me. Grandpa said if I ruined their plan, I'd disappear like Nurse Jackie. Amanda gasped. You little. One of the officers stepped between her and Isla. Ma'am, please step back. Robert barked, you have no right to invade our home. This is outrageous. Lauren pulled out more documents. Here's the court order. And the video evidence. And the medical records. And the signed petitions you were going to file to declare her incompetent at 18. She turned to Evan. You might want to read what your father was planning to do to your niece. And your wife. Amanda's knees buckled. She dropped to the couch and buried her face in her hands. I didn't know what else to do, she sobbed. We were drowning. The company, his company, was failing. He said we could fix it just for a few years. Just until the market turned around. Robert turned sharply. Amanda, shut up. She looked up, eyes rimmed red. You said it would be temporary. You said once she hit 18. We'd just transition the fund. That no one would question a mentally disabled child staying under guardianship. Lauren raised an eyebrow. So, you admit it? I didn't want to keep going. Amanda said, sobbing now. I just didn't know how to stop. Eleanor finally broke her silence. We did what we had to do. We protected the family. That child is different. Lauren replied. Calm and brutal, that child is intelligent, lucid, and incredibly brave. And thanks to Rachel, she will finally be free. The officers escorted Amanda and Robert into the dining room to be questioned. Eleanor sat down stiffly, hands folded in her lap like this was some unpleasant dinner conversation. Jenna crouched beside Isla. You're going to be okay now. Isla nodded, then glanced at me. Can I go back to sleep? Her voice was quiet, but for the first time not afraid. You can, I said. You really can. Evan remained frozen. He looked at his parents, then at me, then at Isla. Finally, he walked toward his niece and knelt in front of her. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. She stared at him for a long time. Then quietly said, I tried to tell someone. But nobody listened. I'm listening now. She gave a small, sad smile. Took long enough. That night, Isla slept in the guest room. Door unlocked, no cameras. A caseworker sat outside. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't have to pretend. I stood in the hallway, watching her chest rise and fall, steady and calm. Lauren stood beside me. You did it, she said. No, I said softly. We did. 3 months later, I sat in a quiet courtroom holding Isla's hand. Her fingers were warm, steady. No tremble this time. She wore a navy dress and sparkly sneakers. The judge smiled at her before turning to read the final order aloud. Custody of Isla Whitmore will be granted temporarily to Rachel and Evan Emerson, pending permanent guardianship review in 6 months. I squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. It was done. The months following that night were chaotic. But healing rarely looks clean. Robert and Amanda were both charged with multiple felonies. Medical abuse, fraud, child endangerment, attempted trust exploitation. Robert, of course, tried to buy his way out. It didn't work. His attempts to intimidate witnesses only added obstruction of justice to the list. Amanda cooperated somewhat. Her tearful confession reduced her sentence, but not by much. She still faced real prison time. Eleanor claimed ignorance. But civil suits were filed. The charities she once chaired began removing her name. The Whitmore name no longer drew applause. It drew disgust. As for Evan, he changed. Not overnight. Not easily. But sincerely. He moved out of his parents' financial sphere. Quit his job at Robert's company. Started a small consultancy with 2 former colleagues. He also showed up. For Isla. For me. Every therapy session. Every school meeting. Every quiet dinner where Isla finally started talking more than 2 sentences at a time. One evening, while we were helping Isla with the class project, she looked up and said, I like our home. It's warm. Even when it snows. I smiled through tears. She hadn't just been neglected. She'd been silenced. Trapped in a lie too heavy for any child to carry. Lauren helped us set up a long-term plan. A new trustee, independent, court-appointed, was now in charge of Isla's original $5 million trust. The additional inheritance from her maternal grandparents, the one Robert tried to bury, was secured. An estimated $32 million, to be released in stages across her life. But Isla didn't talk about the money. She talked about school, about her art teacher who said her drawings had soul, about her new friend Mia who liked frogs and had two moms, about her dream of becoming a vet. At night, she still had nightmares sometimes. I'd find her in the hallway, whispering, "Don't make me take it again." I never told her to stop. I just held her hand and sat with her in the dark until it passed. We didn't rush her healing. Some wounds don't close. They just learn to breathe again. A few weeks ago, she asked if she could call me something different. Rachel feels like a school name, she said. Like I'm in trouble. I laughed. What do you want to call me? She hesitated, then whispered. Can I say, Mom? It was the first time I cried in front of her. Yes, baby. You absolutely can. Evan came into the room, saw us both in tears, and just wrapped us in his arms. No more pretending. No more lies. Just us. Our real family. And now here we are. A new house far from the Whitmore estate. Nothing fancy, just safe and bright and full of color. Isla has her own room, filled with books and paintings and glow-in-the-dark stars. We're building something new. Not from scratch, but from truth. To anyone still watching, still listening, I want to say this. If a child ever looks you in the eye and asks for help, believe them. Even if it's hard. Even if no one else does. Even if it costs you everything. Because sometimes, one person standing between silence and cruelty is enough to save a life. It doesn't take money. It doesn't take power. It takes heart and the courage to not look away. Thank you for listening. If Isla's story touched something in you, please share it. There are more children like her still waiting to be seen. And to Isla, if you ever watch this one day, you are not broken. You were never broken. You are brilliant. And you are free.